Hello, and welcome to the Permission to Breathe podcast, a transformative space dedicated to providing a sanctuary where you can inhale deeply and exhale freely, embracing your grief journey unapologetically. I am your host, Dr. Tammy Isaac, here with you every Monday to offer comfort, guidance, and hope. Together we'll navigate this path, finding moments to pause, reflect, and breathe. Let's begin this journey side by side. Today's episode is brought to you by Collateral Beauty, a Black woman's metamorphosis of grief, self-love, and healing by Dr. Tammy Isaac. For generations, Black women have carried invisible burdens, grieving in silence under the weight of societal expectations and trauma. Now it's time to embrace healing, self-love, and the beauty that remains. In Collateral Beauty, Dr. Tammy Isaac invites you on a powerful journey through grief, faith, and renewal. This book will guide you to process grief and trauma with intention, discover self-love and inner strength, build deeper connections through sisterhood and faith, and embrace vulnerability, forgiveness, and gratitude as tools for growth. Take the first step toward embracing your beauty, your story, and your healing journey. Don't wait. Grab a copy today on Amazon. Have you ever felt like grief put you on an island? Like the world around you kept moving, but you were standing still, isolated in your loss. Even when people check in, even when you're in a crowded room, there's a loneliness that lingers. And it's real. It's deep. And it's something we don't talk about enough. Grief and loneliness are often intertwined, but they are not the same. Grief is about what we've lost, and loneliness is about what we still long for. And sometimes after a loss, we're left feeling both, right? So today we're going to explore why loss can make us feel isolated, how to tell the difference between grief and loneliness, and most importantly, how we can begin to reconnect even when it feels impossible. So if you've been feeling alone in your grief, and if you've wondered why people don't seem to understand, or if you just need a space to breathe, this episode is for you. So let's take a deep breath and let's dive in. One of the hardest things about loss is what happens after the funeral. After the texts stop coming, after the initial wave of support fades. In the beginning, people will check in, they bring food, they send messages, they remind you that they're praying, but then comes silence. And it's in the silence that loneliness creeps in. Grief already feels heavy, but when the world around you seems to move on while you're still carrying the weight of your loss, it can feel like you're completely alone. And it's not that people don't care. It's just that life keeps moving. And for the person grieving, that can feel like abandonment, although it's not. Have you ever felt that shift? The moment when you realize that people weren't checking in as much, that invitations start to slow down, or that you didn't know how to reach out without feeling like a burden to others. Grief definitely has a way of making us retreat. Sometimes we pull away from others because we don't want to bring them down. And sometimes we're just too exhausted to even explain how we're really feeling. And other times we just don't have the words. But here's the thing. Loneliness doesn't just come from being alone. It comes from feeling unseen and unheard and disconnected. And when you're grieving, that disconnection can feel almost unbearable. So what I want you to ask yourself today is, when did I first feel the weight of loneliness after my loss? Was it after people stopped calling? Was it when you sat in a room full of people but felt invisible? Was it when you realized that even though life was moving on, your heart was still standing in the moment you lost your loved one. Stop, pause, and consider that for a moment. Grief and loneliness often walk hand in hand, but they are not the same thing. And understanding the difference between them can be the first step toward our healing. Grief is the emotional, spiritual, and even physical response to loss. It's what happens when something or someone we love has been taken away from us. And grief is personal, it's unpredictable, and it doesn't just fade away with time. It can come in waves. One moment you're fine, the next moment a song or a smell or even just a quiet afternoon can bring it all rushing back. Loneliness, on the other hand, is not just about being alone. It's about feeling disconnected, like there's a space inside of you that no one can reach. And sometimes that space is created by grief. The truth is, you can grieve and not feel lonely because maybe you have a strong support system, a community that surrounds you, or a deep faith that holds you through the loss. But you can also feel lonely even when you're not grieving. Maybe you're surrounded by people, but there's still a disconnect, a sense that no one truly understands what you're feeling. Loneliness is about disconnection. It's not just about being physically alone. It's about feeling unseen, unheard, and emotionally distant from others. You can be in a crowded room and still feel completely alone. In fact, the former U.S. Surgeon General, Dr. Vivek Murthy, reports that 60% of Americans struggle with loneliness. That's amazing. And researchers define loneliness as the gap between the social connections that we need and the connections that we actually have. Dr. Murthy describes three dimensions of loneliness that reflect the different ways that we need connection in order for us to thrive. So the first one is intimate or emotional loneliness. This is the longing for a deep, close relationship, like with a spouse or a best friend or a confidant. It's that person who truly knows you, the one you can be vulnerable with. And when we lose someone who held that role in our lives, we feel an emptiness that actually no casual conversation can really fulfill. Okay. The second one is relational or social loneliness. Now, this is about having meaningful relationships and a sense of belonging. It is the difference between knowing people casually and then having relationships that actually nourish and support you. So if you've ever felt like you have people around you, but no one to truly lean on, then you felt this kind of loneliness. The third one is collective loneliness. This is a broader sense of connection to a community. It's a purpose or a shared identity. It's the feeling of being part of something bigger than yourself, whether that's a church, a workplace, a social movement, or even a culture group. When we lack this, we can find or we can feel isolated from the world at large. Now, here's the thing. Grief can cause loneliness in all three of these areas. When we lose a spouse, a best friend, or a child, we experience intimate loneliness. When our friendships shift after loss, or we no longer feel like we fit in with certain social circles, that's relational loneliness. And when we lose a role in life, like being a caregiver, a partner, or a member of a certain community, we can feel collective loneliness. Grief disrupts our sense of connection, and if we're not aware of it, loneliness can quietly settle in. Grief is a process, but loneliness can become a state of being. If we're not careful, loneliness can take root, making us feel like We're disconnected not just from people, but from God, from purpose, from life itself. And that's why it's important to recognize it for what it is, not a permanent condition, but a space in need of intentional connection. So what I want to ask you is, when do you think about your own experience? Do you feel like it's grief you're carrying, loneliness, or both? Do you find yourself withdrawing because you need space to grieve? Or are you isolating yourself because you don't know how to reconnect? Pause and reflect on that. Grief and loneliness don't just exist in our minds and emotions. They take up space in our bodies too. Loss is not just something we feel, it's something we actually carry. Have you ever noticed that after a loss, your body feels different? Maybe you're more exhausted than usual, even after a full night's sleep. Maybe you feel a tightness in your chest, a lump in your throat, or a weight in your shoulders that just won't go away. Or maybe you've had unexplained headaches, stomach pain, or body aches that seem to linger. This isn't just in your head, it's real, and science backs it up. When we experience loss and loneliness, our nervous system responds as if we are under threat. It triggers the same stress response as physical danger. Our body begins to release cortisol, the stress hormone, which can lead to fatigue, muscle tension, digestive issues, and even a weakened immune system. It's why grief can make you sick and why loneliness can feel physically painful. Now, some of the ways that the body holds grief are: one, fatigue and brain fog. Grief and loneliness drains our energy. It's why a simple task can feel overwhelming and why it's hard to concentrate or stay motivated. And the body is in this state of emotional exhaustion. The second way is tightness in the chest or throat. So, have you ever felt like you physically couldn't breathe when you were grieving? That's because grief activates the nervous system, creating a sensation of constriction, right? And the same goes for loneliness. It can feel like an invisible weight pressing down. The third one is aches, pains, and tension. So the body stores emotional pain in physical ways, in your shoulders, your necks, and your back pain, and common. These pains are common because our muscles tighten when we're under stress. The fourth thing is weakened immune system. So studies have shown that long-term loneliness and unprocessed grief can increase inflammation in the body, which makes it more vulnerable or susceptible to illnesses. And the fifth one is disruptive sleep patterns. Grief and loneliness can cause insomnia or excessive sleep. Some people find themselves unable to sleep at all, while others struggle to get out of bed. So the body is trying to regulate a system that feels unbalanced at the time. So what can we do to help our bodies heal? Healing doesn't just happen in our minds. It happens in our bodies too, of course, right? And sometimes the first step is just noticing where grief and loneliness are actually showing up physically in your body. Now, here are a few little gentle ways to start releasing the tension from your body. So one, of course, is to breathe intentionally. Taking deep breaths will help regulate your nervous system and reduce the stress. There's actually an episode in season 1 where I talk about breathing. Would also be helpful to go back and listen to that. Move your body, stretching, walking, yoga, any movement that helps helps to shake off the physical weight. So just getting your body moving, getting all of the anxiety and the tension out by movement. The third thing is hydrate and nourish yourself. Loss can make us forget to take care of our own basic daily needs, and eating is one of the number one things that people tend to forget to do, or don't even feel a hunger. So it's important that you continue to eat and continue to get the amount of water that you need within your body so that you can support your body's healing process through the grief and the lonely experiences that you're having. uh, Another thing is to get outside, get some fresh air, get some sunlight. And scientifically, it's proven to really boost your mood and your energy. So when we say get outside, get some vitamin D on your face, there's this type of refreshing that comes from allowing the warmth or the wind of the day to just blow on you. And the last thing is to seek safe touch. So a hug from a friend, a massage, or even placing your hand on your heart can help soothe the nervous system. So touch is very powerful. And one of the things I always tell people when I would sit with people at end of life is that touch is very powerful, and that that connection is always felt. And so I always encourage patients and their families actually to gently touch their loved one as they're going through that process, as well as speaking to them, because hearing is the last thing to go. After loss, connection can feel complicated. Grief doesn't just impact how we feel, it impacts how we relate to the world around us. It changes the way we engage with people, how we experience familiar spaces, and even how we see ourselves. Suddenly, the relationships that once felt comfortable may feel distant. The routines that once brought joy may feel foreign. And the places where we once felt a sense of belonging can become painful reminders of what's actually missing. Have you ever walked into a room after a deep loss and felt like you no longer fit? Maybe it's the church service that once felt comforting but now feels hollow. The hymns sound the same. The prayers are just as fervent, but something is missing. Maybe it's the family gatherings where the person you lost should be sitting there. The laughter is there. The conversations continue, but there's a seat at the table that will never be filled again. Or maybe it's your circle of friends who don't quite know how to be with you anymore. So the conversations feel awkward and distant, or even forced a little. And you sit there surrounded by people, and yet you feel completely alone. Grief has shifted your relationships, and that shift can now feel like isolation. One of the hardest things about grief is realizing that the world continues to move forward even when we feel like we are still standing still. And people go back to their routines, they return to their normal conversations, their usual jokes, their daily tasks. But when you're grieving, normal doesn't exist anymore. Life as you knew it is now reshaped, and yet the world expects you to keep functioning as if nothing has actually changed. This disconnection or this disconnect can feel very profound, and it can make you feel like you're living in a completely different reality from everyone else around you, as if grief has placed you on one side of a glass wall while the rest of the world carries on without you. You can see them, they can see you, but something invisible is separating you. And that separation is what makes grief feel so lonely. Here's what I want you to hear today, though. While grief may shift our relationships, it doesn't mean we are meant to stay disconnected forever. We were created for connection. We were designed to be in relationship with others, and healing happens while in community. It may not feel like it right now, but there are still people who want to hold space for you. There are still relationships that can bring comfort, and there are still places where you do belong. Rebuilding connection after loss isn't about forcing yourself to engage with people before you're ready. It's actually about taking the small steps that allows you to be seen. It allows you to reach out when you can, allowing yourself to believe that even in grief, love and connection are still available to you. Are you grieving and feel like you're struggling alone? You don't have to walk this path by yourself. Book a virtual session with Dr. Tammy Isaac at Breathe Grief Counseling Center. Visit us online at www.breathegriefcounselingcenter.com. Dr. Isaac will help you put your emotions into words. She'll help you reduce the feeling of isolation. She'll help you understand that everyone grieves differently, and also help you prevent unhealthy coping mechanisms. Take control of your life with world-class counseling sessions today with Dr. Tammy Isaac. When we've been hurt by loss, stepping back into connection can feel overwhelming. The thought of building new relationships or deepening existing ones can bring up fear. Fear of losing someone again, fear of being misunderstood, or fear of being let down. Maybe you've thought to yourself, what's the point? People leave, life changes. It's easier just to keep to myself. And I get that. I really do. But here's the truth. While grief may shift our relationships, it doesn't mean we are meant to stay disconnected forever. Again, we were created for connection. We were designed to be in relationship with others, and healing happens in community. Why does connection feel so hard after a loss? I'll give you a few examples. Now, if you're struggling to reconnect with others after loss, you're not alone, okay? Grief and loneliness do create barriers to this connection. And here are a couple of reasons why it feels so hard. One is the fear of being a burden. When we're grieving, we often convince ourselves that people don't want to hear about our pain, so we withdraw instead of reaching out. But the truth is, healing only happens within community. The second one is not feeling understood. Sometimes it feels like no one gets it. Maybe they say the wrong things, they avoid talking about their loss, or even try to fix your grief. And this can make connection feel exhausting rather than comforting. The third thing is guilt over finding joy again. I think this one is a big one because after deep loss, moments of joy can just feel wrong. It's like laughing or enjoying something is almost like a betrayal of what we lost. But joy and grief, they can coexist. And reconnecting with life doesn't mean forgetting. It means continuing to live even as we hold space for our grief. And this is one that's really major for me, considering since my mother died on my birthday, and it was very hard to find space to be able to hold, to honor her on that day, and then also celebrate my birthday. But I've learned over years that the two can coexist together and that I can hold space for both. Here's the fourth one: loss of identity. Some losses change who we are. A widow may feel lost without her spouse. A grieving parent may feel like they've lost their sense of purpose. And when we don't know who we are anymore, connecting with others can feel unfamiliar and overwhelming. I often have said that after the loss of my mother, my identity did change. I felt like I grew into someone different, not so far-fetched from who I already was, but I grew into another person because my life changed and things in my life shifted. And so I had to grow in spaces where didn't have the growth, and I had to strengthen in places that I didn't have the strength. And so things look quite different from where I thought my life would be, or where I thought it was heading. But you do because you identify so much in the relationship that you have with the person, place, or thing, that your identity sometimes become that. And then when that shifts and change, now you don't know who you are, because that thing, person, place, or thing is no longer there to basically affirm who you are, instead of already just existing in who we have already known ourselves to be. Um, so those are the things that makes it hard to come back into connection. But we have to relearn how to belong. So the question is, like, where do we go from here? How do we step back into relationships when grief makes everything so difficult? It starts basically with giving yourself permission to be different, because you are different. You have shifted. Loss literally changes us. And that means that it may take time to really figure out where you belong now. Some relationships will deepen and others may fade, and new ones may form in places that you never expected. And all of that is a-okay. The truth is, you were never meant to grieve alone. We were created for connection, and healing happens, what I say, in community. It happens in relationship with others. It may not look the same as before, but there are still people, still spaces where you are seen, where you are understood, and where you are held. And some of the ways that we can start building connection after our loss, some of the ways is to, one, start small. Connection doesn't have to be overwhelming. You can just send a text or accept an invitation that somebody invites you somewhere. Sit in a coffee shop where there are people. That was one of my favorite things to do, is to go to a coffee shop and just work there and sit there all day. And I would meet lots of people. People walk in, walk by, and just have small talk with them. Another way is to maybe find uh, people that you feel are safe to be around. Not everyone will understand your grief, and that's okay, but finding people who do, finding people who understand grief, finding people who understand your grief, finding a support group, finding a therapist. It makes all the more difference when you have somebody that already understands, that you don't have to explain it, so it doesn't make it exhausting for you. 3, allow yourself to be seen. Let people in. Okay. If someone asks how you're doing, consider answering honestly, instead of just saying the programmed, I'm okay. Fine. I'm okay. Okay. A connection starts with vulnerability. And so you have to find small spaces where you can try to be vulnerable when people do ask you, like, how are you doing? Let yourself be seen. The 4th thing is maybe you can create some types of rituals that you can do, some traditions. You'll start doing some things that may be different than before. And that's a-okay as well. Just find ways that you can honor your loved one and make space for those experiences. And then the last thing is, give yourself grace. I'm always telling you, give yourself grace. Some days connection will feel entirely too hard, and that's a-okay as well. And healing, just like the grief, is not linear. The goal isn't to force connection, but rather to remain open to what connection can offer you on your healing journey. There comes a point in grief where loneliness stops feeling like something temporary and starts feeling like a companion. At first, it's just an aftershock of loss, a quiet ache that lingers in the spaces your loved one used to feel. But over time, if we're not careful, loneliness can start to feel like home. Maybe you've been there. Maybe you are there. And maybe isolation has become easier than connection. Maybe the idea of reaching out feels exhausting, or maybe the people you would reach out for are no longer there. So you learn to live with the loneliness. You wake up with it, eat with it, work with it, and go to bed with it. And little by little, you convince yourself that this is just the way life is now. But what if it doesn't have to be? There's a difference between being alone and being lonely. One is a choice, the other is a wound. Solitude is the ability to be alone with ourselves in a way that is peaceful, restorative, and even healing. It is a gift. But isolation, it's the retreat into loneliness as a defense mechanism, and it can keep us stuck in our grief. After loss, it's important to learn the difference between the two, because the truth is there's a way to be alone without feeling abandoned. There's a way to sit with your grief without letting loneliness define you. There is a way to honor your love and loss without allowing it to separate you from actually living life completely. I understand that stepping out of loneliness isn't easy. I know that grief can make you want to pull away instead of leaning in, but I also know that healing happens when we allow ourselves to reconnect bit by bit, step by step. So, if loneliness has settled into your life, I want you to take one step toward connection today. Maybe that step is reaching out to a friend, and maybe it's allowing yourself to be vulnerable with someone you trust. Maybe it's simply reminding yourself that you are worthy of love, even in your grief. Because grief may change our relationships, but it doesn't have to take them away. Love didn't end with loss, and neither does connection. If you've made it to this point in the episode, I want to take a moment to honor you, because talking about grief and loneliness isn't easy. Sitting with it, reflecting on it, acknowledging its presence in our lives, it takes courage. And I see you. I know that loss changes things. It shifts relationships. It reshapes how we move through the world. And sometimes it leaves us feeling untethered, like we're floating in a space where no one can reach us. But I also know this: you were not created to stay in that place forever. Dr. Vivek Murthy reminds us that connection isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. We were designed for intimate, relational, and collective connection. And while grief may cause us to pull away, healing calls us back toward community, back toward relationship, back toward the spaces where we are seen, heard, and even held. So, before we close, I want to invite you to take just one small step toward connection this week. And it doesn't have to be big. Maybe it's sending a text to someone you've been meaning to check in with. Maybe it's letting yourself say yes to an invitation instead of pulling away. Maybe it's sitting in the space where people are present, even if you're not ready to fully engage. Maybe it's simply reminding yourself that you are not alone. Connection doesn't mean erasing grief. It doesn't mean forcing yourself to move on. It simply means allowing yourself to be seen again, even in the midst of your healing. Before I go, I want you to hear this from me. Your grief is real. Your loneliness is valid, but neither of them get to define your entire story. Okay? There is still life to be lived. There are still people who care. There are still spaces where you belong. And when you are ready, whenever that may be, there are hands reaching out, waiting to hold space for you. You don't have to do this alone. If this episode resonated with you, I'd love for you to share it with someone who might need to hear it. And if you're looking for a community that understands grief, loneliness, and healing, I invite you to connect with me on social media or through the Permission to Breathe community. Let's continue this journey together. Until next time, give yourself permission to breathe, to feel, to heal. And remember, love didn't end with loss, and neither does connection. Thank you so much for joining me today on the Permission to Breathe podcast. I hope today created space for you to breathe and find peace on your journey. I invite you to join me again next Monday for another episode as we continue to navigate this path together. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and to share the podcast. Until next time, take care and keep breathing unapologetically.